You wake up, you check your phone, it's 7:42 a.m. You have exactly 18 minutes before you're technically late. This tiny number on a glowing screen controls more of your daily behavior than almost anything else in your life. And here's the thing nobody thinks about. That number is completely made up. Time doesn't come with numbers attached. The universe doesn't hand out minutes. At some point, a human being had to invent the entire concept of counting time. And once you start asking when that happened, the answer gets a lot stranger than a calendar on your wall. Let's start with the obvious problem. Ancient humans didn't have clocks, and for most of human history, they didn't need them. If you're a hunter-gatherer roaming the African savanna 200,000 years ago, your life runs on a much simpler system. The sun comes up, you do things, the sun goes down, you stop. That's not primitive, that's efficient. Sunlight was free, universal, and impossible to ignore. Every human on Earth had access to the exact same clock hanging in the sky, and nobody had to build it, wind it, or charge it overnight. But here's where it gets interesting. Even without numbers, ancient humans were almost certainly tracking time far earlier than most people assume. Not with clocks, but with patterns. The moon is the obvious one. It changes shape every single night in a cycle that repeats roughly every 29 and a half days, visible to literally everyone on the planet with functioning eyes. And there's archaeological evidence that humans were paying very close attention to this. A bone fragment discovered in the Lobombo Mountains of southern Africa, dated to roughly 44,000 years ago, contains 29 distinct notches carved into it in a deliberate sequence. Some researchers believe this is one of the earliest known lunar calendars, a physical tally of the moon's cycle scratched into bone by someone who wanted to keep track of something that mattered enough to record. Think about that for a second. Tens of thousands of years before writing existed, before agriculture, before anything resembling a civilization, someone sat down and thought, I want to remember how many nights have passed. That's not survival instinct. That's the beginning of an entirely new kind of thinking. The idea that time itself could be measured, recorded, and referenced later. So why would tracking the moon actually matter to someone who's just trying to survive day to day? The answer is almost certainly food and reproduction. Lunar cycles line up closely with tidal patterns, animal migration behavior, and plant growth cycles. If you know roughly how many nights until a specific plant flowers or a particular animal migrates through your territory, you have a massive survival advantage. You're not just reacting to the world around you anymore, you're predicting it. And prediction, it turns out, might be one of the most powerful evolutionary tools our species ever developed. Now let's talk about the sun, because the moon wasn't the only pattern our ancestors were watching. Seasonal change is one of the most consequential things a prehistoric human needed to anticipate. Get the timing wrong on when winter arrives, and you don't get a second chance. Archaeologists have found evidence that some of the oldest structures ever built by humans, including parts of Stonehenge in England, dating back roughly 5,000 years, were deliberately aligned with the solstices, the specific days when the sun rises and sets at its most extreme points in the sky. This wasn't decoration, this was infrastructure. A massive stone calendar built to track the changing seasons with enough precision to plan an entire agricultural year around it. And here's the twist that a lot of people miss. The invention of agriculture around 10,000 BCE didn't just change what humans ate, it completely transformed their relationship with time. Hunter-gatherers could survive with a loose, flexible sense of time because their food sources were spread out and varied. But farmers can't afford to be loose about timing. Plant your crops even a few weeks too early or too late and your entire harvest fails. Suddenly, tracking the passage of days and seasons wasn't just useful, it was the difference between a full granary and mass starvation. Agriculture didn't just create the need for time tracking, it created the need for precision. This is exactly the environment where the earliest formal calendars start showing up in the historical record. Ancient Egypt developed one of the first solar calendars around 2900 BCE, based on the annual flooding cycle of the Nile River, a pattern so reliable that Egyptian civilization essentially organized its entire year around predicting it. Get the flood timing wrong in your planning, and your crops either drown or dry out. The stakes could not have been higher. Meanwhile, over in Mesopotamia, the Sumerians were doing something even more foundational. They developed one of the earliest number systems specifically designed around counting time, and it's the reason your entire day is still divided the way it is right now. The Sumerians used a base 60 counting system, which is exactly why we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 360 degrees in a circle. That's not a coincidence. That's a direct inheritance from a civilization that existed roughly 5,000 years ago, and somehow their math still runs your alarm clock every single morning. But smaller units of time, the ones we obsess over today, hours, minutes, seconds, those took much longer to matter to anyone. For most of human history, splitting a day into precise hourly chunks would have been almost meaningless. Precise timekeeping only becomes valuable once human society gets complicated enough to require coordination between people who can't just look at each other and agree what time it is. And that's exactly what happened. As cities grew larger and more complex, coordinating trade, religious ceremonies, and eventually labor required increasingly precise shared systems. Sundials appeared in ancient Egypt and Babylon thousands of years ago. Water clocks followed, using the steady, predictable drip of water to measure time even when the sun wasn't visible. Each new invention solved a coordination problem that simply didn't exist for smaller, looser hunter-gatherer groups. The truly mechanical clock, the ancestor of the one on your wall, didn't appear until medieval Europe, around the 13th and 14th centuries, largely driven by monasteries that needed to coordinate prayer times with genuine precision throughout the day and night. Religious discipline of all things is one of the major forces that pushed humanity toward obsessively accurate timekeeping. So when you really trace it all the way back, the story of counting time isn't really about clocks at all. It's about coordination. Every leap forward in timekeeping happened because humans needed to synchronize with something: the moon's cycle for food, the seasons for survival, and eventually each other for increasingly complex societies. Time itself hasn't changed since the very first sunrise. What changed is us, and our endless need to get everyone on the same page at the same moment. So the next time you glance at your phone and feel that small flicker of anxiety about being 18 minutes late, remember what you're actually looking at. You're staring at the end result of a 44,000-year-old idea that started with someone carving notches into a bone under an African sky, just trying to keep track of the moon.